we'd say, well, what if we did this, and then we could see more of that. And so that's like really quickly, whereas in the real world, like that would be a process.
All right, Beau, welcome back to the podcast. Second time guest.
It is
rarefied
my second time.
air, my friend.
It is.
Well
I think the last time I was on with Tom talking about curling.
It was a big it was the golfers curling episode.
That's right.
Yeah,
so excited to talk about golf, or a new version of golf
yes,
today.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I was just saying, thanks for having me here, the Performance Lab. This place is pretty outrageous. It's, I got real sand, I got fairway and rough, and this is outrageous behind it.
It's wild.
That was the thing that got me the most, was the screen when I walked in, because they do the 12-inch regular simulator version of the screen, which is like a dot on that thing. And then it's going to be even bigger when they go to the SoFi Center.
Exactly. I think that when we try to talk about TGL, I think that's the thing that people don't quite, they have it in their mind it's going to be like a regular simulator screen. And this is like so far from that, it's really impressive.
Yes. The word is they're going to have me hit shots into the screen after this, and I'm petrified of like breaking something around here, but I'm assured that the screen's big enough even for someone like me to hit it.
You got it. You'll be just fine. Just fine.
We'll see. So in the last pod, which was very good, people should go listen to it, we talked about your history in golf and all of that, and Beau Welling design and all that. I won't go through that again, but suffice to say, you've done a lot of work with Tiger over the years and working with him to build stuff. But what's it like to basically take me back to the beginning? So now you're building something that he's going to play into that's sort of a mixed reality type of, you're kind of coming up from scratch almost.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's mixed reality is probably a good way to say it, because we have parts of the experience that are very much in the virtual world, but then we have parts of the experience that are in the real world, and those two have to match up. And so we certainly have never done anything like this before. I think we're inquisitive people and smart people, and we like to think we're, have a sort of innovative spirit. So it's been a super exciting process to be involved in. And as we get closer and closer, I just get more and more excited to see about all the stuff that the team has worked so hard on coming to reality, and it's going to be awesome.
So when did you, TGL's been kind of cooking for about 2-ish years now. When did you get involved?
I mean, I was probably pretty early on in the inception. So as you mentioned, we do have a relationship with TGR, and with Tiger's involvement here, there was sort of a natural connection. So when things first were being conceptualized, we got involved really at first on the real world part of this, which we call the green zone. So it's the part where the players will actually play to a green, an artificial green, and green surrounds, so the close-in shots. And so trying to figure out how do you do that was a daunting task, because I think one of the key things that all golf designers want is variety. So like, how do you take one green and be able to use it again and again and again, and it not be the same thing? So the team and us ultimately came up with this idea of having a green that the surfaces could be modulated, so change, but also to put it on a turntable such that it can spin around, and how bunkering is positioned. You could have bunkering or not bunkering with caps and things of this nature. So I think it's been, and it's the design concept guys, it's really easy to say all that, I'll put it on a turntable and modulate this, but then the real guys like figure out how to do that. And so everything that's underneath the green zone is an incredible amount of engineering, and it's an incredible amount of coordination, and I think it's unlike anything I've certainly ever been involved in, but I think it's truly like a unique thing, period. And so I think all of that, and that's just a small part of the totality of TGL, but all of that makes me very excited to see this come to reality. So
when you're looking at the green zone, your role in that is, I think the green should be this big, or I think we need this many pinnable areas, that kind of, like, where was sort of your role? And then it obviously going to hand it off to the engineers at some point. But how was sort of the connection, right, between, so I got to make this playable for pros, but also we got to actually be able to build this thing?
So I think, to me, one of the exciting parts of this whole process has been how collaborative the team has worked together. And so our entree was to be a golf design consultant with the Green Zone and thinking through size and slope and this kind of stuff. But I think everybody came at it from a different angle. So obviously there's engineering, obviously there's the concept of the game and the product that we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't like you just concept something and pass it off. It very much was everybody working together to try to figure out how do we do this kind of thing that's never been done before in the world.
For you, in that, what was kind of your biggest challenge? What was the part? Was there a moment where you're looking at it and being like, well, I don't know if we're going to do this?
I mean, I think there are many, many moments that were that. And, I think that when we started off just thinking about modulating the surface of the green, and there's technology that folks had that could do that, but then to start the idea of putting on a turntable and like, what does that mean, like underneath, and how does all that work with different actuators and whatnot? I think all of that felt extraordinarily complex and daunting. That's more the technical engineering side. But then I think on the gameplay side or the golf design side, I think we would think about, okay, well, we've got a 3,600 square foot green. What kind of slopes can we really have on that? It's artificial turf as opposed to real turf, though we went down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out, could we do this with real turf as well? Jeez. So like everything was on the table. And so I think there were many times I thought, I don't know if this is ever going to happen. This feels daunting. This feels impossible. But I think we and my team, we're ones that like challenge. So like every time you sort of kind of get down to like, can this work or not? Then somebody'd come along and say, well, what if this? And you kind of get super excited about it again. So, coming back in here into this studio, this performance lab, knowing we're getting closer and closer, knowing that people have tried and tested this, I don't want to keep saying the word excited, but like I am so super excited about the world getting to see the results of all the team's hard work to
Sure. Well, there's something cool about, again, like creating something from nothing, basically.
Yeah.
Because in your day to day, it's all right. Well, here's a piece of land. How am I going to, create golf? Or even, there's already a golf course here.
Yep.
How do we, kind of work through all that? This is not that, obviously.
So this is very much not that. And so certainly the virtual part of this. So what's going to happen with TGL is the players will play into the big screen that you referenced, and that will exist in this more simulator virtual world. And so golf holes have all been designed by us and others to exist in that world, but that they ultimately all have to connect into the green zone. And again, the green can be oriented kind of different ways. And so that virtual world, to answer your question about the real world having many constraints, the virtual world didn't have so many constraints. It did have some, and we'd have to react to those in terms of, we didn't really want players to have to play short shots into the screen. So there's some constraints related to that. But other than that, like anything was really kind of possible. And in some ways, that's almost maybe even more challenging, because like when you have constraints, it helps you to define and kind of think through. When all of a sudden the world is your oyster, you can kind of do kind of anything. And I think that our process, we very much initially kept thinking we wanted golf holes to look like real world golf holes, but be super dramatic and exciting and fit the game, the nature of the game, and not do holes that were like more video game looking holes. But I think we ultimately started to realize that, wait a minute, why would you not want to go do these fantastic looking holes?
Did you play golf video games when you were growing up?
You got the opportunity to do that. And so we have one, I think, on the screen behind us.
Yeah.
There's a hole that, and I'm not sure we'd ever see this kind of hole, this canyon hole, quick draw, in the real world, but in this virtual world, this is super possible. So like, why wouldn't you want to explore something that is possible when you have the opportunity to do so?
Right. Yeah. And you're also kind of, I don't know if you tell me, if you're unbound essentially, right? By like, okay, well, they're only pro players are going to play this.
Yeah.
Like 12 handicap duffers like me, you don't have to worry about me hitting into a canyon.
Right.
But those guys, you can kind of, I guess probably the same thing, right? It's a challenge to figure out how to challenge them, but also you only have to worry about challenging them.
Yes. And so again, that's a unique situation. And then to dovetail onto that is it's in essence match play as well. So there's a difference, I think, in design for when you just have your match play lens on versus sort of a stroke play lens. And so in terms of the holes that we've designed, we've done a whole series of par threes. So we want to say you're going to hit from here, and then orient the green in different ways and put the hole in different settings. But then we've also done a series of sort of half par type holes, so like big risk reward par fives, because I think that's where the drama is really going to come out, is looking at watching players make calculations about risk and like what do they take on and what do they not. And I think because it is a match play environment, we've tried to design holes to encourage people to take on risk. And I think if you look at many of the classic tournament golf holes that people really remember, a lot of them are these sort of risk reward par fives. So we've been able to put them in settings that we wouldn't comprehend in kind of the real world.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking about that, kind of what you said at the end there, that like, so much of, real, I'm calling it real golf, but golf outside of this performance lab is, a lot of it's defined by the classic holes, like road holes, been around, all these things, they've been around and they've sort of established themselves as these are truly classic holes. And so I guess the first part of that is, how much of that kind of, that sort of thing did you take into account when you were building some of these holes? Or did you just kind of just unburden yourself from that altogether and just say, oh my gosh, I can build one over a canyon, who cares about the road hole? I
think the answer to the question would depend on where we were in our sort of process. So it kind of changed through time. But I think what we became more accepting of, like anything's possible, the more we kind of delved into it. I think, but fundamentally, being golf course designers, we wanted this to be real world golf choices, strategy that we're trying to have in these virtual golf holes. And so we've really looked through the lens of strategy, and these guys are so good, and they're able to calculate risk and know risk so well. It's challenging because you want to put them into a situation where maybe they're a little bit uncomfortable or unsure, and we have a shot clock in the game. So like even that, it becomes part of this whole thing too. But I think the tournament holes that I personally always really enjoy are holes that I would say have high volatility in scoring. So they're very scoreable, but you can make big numbers. So like we just saw the postage stamp at Troon. So it doesn't have to be long. It can be really short hole, but like you have, birdies and big numbers. Or, a 13 or 15 at Augusta National would be another classic sort of high volatility holes. Birdies very much, or eagle birdies very much possible, but you're going to have bogeys and double bogeys. And so I think we've tried to incorporate that type of environment into many of the holes that we've designed, because I think that will make for really interesting content and for the fans. And me personally, I'm super excited to see how these world-class athletes are going to make decisions on our golf holes.
That's awesome. So did you, as you were sort of looking at it, you're like, oh my gosh, now we can kind of do whatever we want. Were you taking real life examples like 13 and 15 at Augusta and be like, what I love about that hole is X. What I love about this hole is Y. What if we married them together and did I'm sure, did you practice, did you try any of that stuff as your?
Yeah, I think like any design process, you're sort of affected by things that you've seen and experienced and whatnot. So I don't think this was sort of anything different. We certainly didn't set out to copy any holes or anything like that. But I think these sort of, looking at conceptually what are the elements that make for this interesting risk-reward decision-making drama. We certainly, thought about holes that do that. And so, several of our holes, for example, have a cape type setting to them on tee shots or even second shots where, you take on more risk, you bite off more. If you're successful, there is a reward at the end of that, or you play more conservatively and then have a more difficult choice on the second shot. And that could be any par hole, it doesn't have to be a par five, but I think even with par threes that we've done, we've tried to use the green orientation and how it works on the turntable and how it marries up to even get players hopefully thinking about tee shot shape of what shape of a shot do I need to hit in here in order to get close. And so I think as you do that though, you may take on more risk. So I think I keep saying risk and reward, but I think that was the big lens. I think that we try to design the holes is to really try to get the player making choices.
Sure. Did length? I mean, in terms of length, I'm sure you have a rough idea, but did you guys have to do a lot of work and be like, all right, well, the average distance drive is this, average par 3 length is this. Like, did you how did distance kind of factor into some of those?
Well, so I think distance factors into everything we do all the time, like real world time. And so we're big data people. I actually have a degree in physics, so like even the science of golf and trajectory of golf is a big part of our normal process. And then we take it into this world. We're able to think about it even in other ways. And so this hole that we have behind us is called Quick Draw, which has it's a really, really long par 5 playing around the rim of a canyon. And so like if you play the conservative route, maybe over 700 yards, but very much not reachable. But there is a plateau emerging out of the desert floor or the canyon floor that is a patch of grass that's out there. And so if a player reaches that, they have the ability to reach the green in 2. But the carry to get there is, going to be 310 or something like that. But it plays downhill 36 feet. And so they'll have the ability to make that carry, but it's going to feel like this very, fantastical sort of heroic type shot. And,
right.
And so I think to answer your question, we have thought about all of that in terms of distance and whatnot. And so many of these risk reward par 5s that we've done have very much thought about that of like, hey, if you go out at this extreme distance and are successful, then you have a huge benefit. But if you're not successful, there's going to be a big punishment. So sort of heroic design holes in many cases, but yes, distance has been a big factor in that, as well as elevation change.
Interesting. So then, you, back to the green, the turntable is pretty cool. And are you, so you do all of that, and then you're sitting there with your team and you're just taking this circle, and you're like, all right, well, what's the best and worst way to have this green oriented for this hole? Or did you work backward? You're like, I want the green to be like this, and now I'm going to go this way.
Yeah, it would be a really interesting question to ask the other designers, because they were inherited, here is the green zone, and here's how the green zone works.
Right, because you helped kind of build it.
But we helped design it. And so I think we kind of thought about all of that kind of from the beginning. And so I think when we got into designing our virtual holes, I think we first thought, like, what setting do we want this to be in? Like, how can it be dramatic, and how can there be strategy with the tee shot? And then we would orient the green in the way that then supported the what we were asking the player to do from the tee shot. So it's sort of like we kind of knew we had the flexibility of moving and adjusting the green, and we could do that to fit what we had done before. So we kind of did it more of tee to green.
Interesting. So then, so wind and weather, probably not too much of a factor in this game yet, as far as I understand, right? Were you guys factoring into like, all right, well, this hole, we don't have like a 35-mile-an-hour prevailing wind? So
I think we thought about it more in terms of like the setting. So like if we have a hole that is called crack on, so crack's the Irish word for fun. Tom would certainly know about this.
Yep,
but,
shout out Tom Coyne.
Yeah, but and so, we never specifically said, hey, we're designing this hole to be in a very windy environment, but in my mind, like, it's meant to be of Ireland, so it should be a windy environment. Or we have holes that, play along the cliffs above an ocean, and so in my mind, wind would be a factor in that. But I think just like in the real world, to me, what would be fun is that it changes, so it's not the same all the time. So a hole may present, one way, in one version of TGL, and maybe it shows up a year later, and the conditions are totally different, and it plays very, very differently.
Yeah. Are you going so have you designed most of the holes so far that they're going to use, or are you still kind of building them out? Or are you in the middle where you're like, oh, we have this canyon hole mostly made, but what if we moved the rim of the canyon 20 feet this way?
Sure.
Kind of a thing. So, where are you kind of in that process?
Yeah, so we've designed 6 golf holes, and Augie Pizzo's designed some holes, the Nicklaus organization have designed some holes, and so we're pretty much done with the holes, our 6 holes.
Okay.
There might be some final sort of tweaking to a few of them, but for most, all intents and purposes, they're sort of done. But you know what? I just thought with Tom's interest in golf design and your interest, like maybe we need to do a collaboration, a future TGL
now you're talking.
of a golfer's
like
journal
a broken tee type of situation.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about that?
Oh, that would be. I would leave Tom to design most of that, but I just
we could help. We could help. So.
That's great. That's good. Yeah, I want it to look like a broken tee, and I also want there to be a 12 handicap tee box.
All right.
Halfway up the fairway for me.
Good.
That'd be perfect. That'd be awesome. So then, when they get to gameplay, are you? What's the kind of? Are you most excited to see them kind of take on the tee shot in something like this, or are you most interested in the green zone area?
I mean, I'm sort of a holistic guy, so I think I'm interested in all of it, to be honest.
That was a bad answer.
No,
come on.
But I think to me, what we're trying to do is when they're on that tee, we're trying to put a decision in front of them.
Sure.
And so on a par 5 that we've done, it's going to be what's my line of play? Like how much risk do I take with the line of play? I think on the par 3s that we've done, it's very much going to be what is the tee shot shape? How should I try to shape this into this really small green?
Since you can move the greens, are you guys involved in like, okay, well, it's going to slope hard left to right or right to left? Are you designing that in as you go too?
Yeah, so there's in essence 3 areas of the green that can be adjusted, and then there's some elements of the green that are fixed, and then you put it on the turntable. So like there's a high point on one part of the green, and there's an upper tier on one part of the green, and so how that gets oriented related to the line of play is really going to dictate a lot of strategy really across all the golf holes that get designed.
Yeah.
And so that orientation is something that we have, not only does it marry up to what happens in the virtual world, but it's integral to the whole thing. Now I think there could be a time where you look at multiple different green orientations for the same hole, but I think that's down the road. Like right now there'll be one green orientation for the hole as designed.
Right. Have you played any?
I have not played any. I think maybe did I chip a putt last time I was here, maybe. But
I don't know.
Like you, I'd be worried about breaking.
Yeah,
something.
I'm a little scared about breaking something, but we're gonna give it a try.
Yeah.
And when you can, so you've got your 6 holes done. Are you now? Is your mind racing? Are you thinking like, oh, I want to make more, kind of a thing, or are you just sort of?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd love to make, I'm a golf course designer. Of course I want to make more golf holes. Yeah,
right.
no, it'd be great. I mean, and I feel like we kind of understand it better now too, as well as not just having gone through the design process, but now having the testing that the team has done on the individual holes. I think that's probably informed some thoughts about some future ideas.
Right, and when you see the pros play it, because I was talking to Scott earlier, I think when these guys get in here, or into the stadium, as good as they are, it's still going to be a really big adjustment.
For sure.
To try to figure out, like, how to do this and kind of be good at it. And I imagine, they're the best, so they'll figure it out eventually. But I would imagine, so are you going to be paying attention and getting the data and being like, all right, for the next season, the canyon hole, we're going to lengthen it or do something, like, are you going to kind of like, is that sort of the second level of this whole thing for you? So
I would assume yes. I mean, I think the team will do that. I think we would do, like any tournament golf hole that we're involved in the real world, we do the same thing.
Now you can actually do it.
Yeah, and so at least a lot easier. So I think so. But I was with Tiger actually yesterday and coming back from a site visit, and he knew I was coming here today, and he was already asking me some of these questions, just like what you're referencing. Oh, it's just how it's going to work, and how the tee situation work. What happens if you have to do a drop? How's the green going to work and orient and this kind of stuff. So
what do you think he's most interested in?
I think it's the newness of it all, like the innovative part of it. I think, and he seemed excited about it.
Yeah, is he trying to asking you for hole designs in advance to try to get an advantage on everyone?
Nothing like that. It was just more like where we are in the process and some of the detail of kind of the gameplay.
Have you guys talked about any of, just like big picture stuff, like, oh yeah, we're gonna have a canyon hole or anything like that? Or are you guys?
No.
Is he just sort of pumped about the whole process?
I think he's pumped about the whole process. I mean, I've worked with him now for 18 years. Is that right? And so, I mean, I have a good sense of how his mind thinks vis-a-vis golf design. And so I think what he'll find very interesting about playing this game is going to be this thing I keep talking about of like calculating risk and making decisions.
Yeah.
And I think that the nature of the game is really going to dictate decisions as well. You know, if one person plays conservative, then maybe the next person plays conservative, or vice versa. Or one person plays conservative, hey, here's my chance to go be aggressive. And obviously the game has some elements designed into it to even encourage those
Well,
kinds
and then there's no caddies, there's just the digital caddy.
Right.
So they're just going to be standing there and be like, all right, well, if we hit it here, then we got to go here, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And you've messed with the digital caddy, right? Is it fun?
Oh yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
I like that.
Lots of fun.
I think I need a digital caddy to follow me
it'd be
around.
good. I'd love to have a digital caddy follow me around.
That sounds like a good idea.
I think the shot clock's going to be interesting too. Like with all this decision making, like you have to make it pretty quickly, and you know, they may.
I think all of us are going to appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think, or maybe you already have, some of the lessons you're learning from this experience? Are you bringing it out to your other designs, or is there anything where you're like, oh well, maybe this changed my thinking about, I don't know, risk or the way greens are made, or, you know, anything?
So my first reaction is no, because like in our real practice, like we're not designing for these guys. We're designing for me and you. And so me and you, like we're not going to be going for the plateau out in the middle of the canyon. But I think that once we see people play, the professionals play, I could see seeing how they approach these decisions will affect us in the real world. So come back to me about and see if I have a better answer for that one in the future.
In your time with Tiger and the holes that you guys designed together, is there anything that you've learned by sort of, I'm sure by now he's sort of some main tenets of the things that he likes to see in a design? Is there anything that that you've seen that you kind of thought, well, that could work out here? Because I know playability is kind of a big thing for him, and using the ground and stuff like that. Is there anything that you kind of pulled into this too? Yeah, I mean, I think Tiger's sort of his core design philosophy is very much related to playability. Like I think he knows that, you know, many people are not great golfers, and that he wants experiences that they want to enjoy. And so this isn't that. So this has been a different experience than that. But I think as a player, he loves options. So the optionality is something that's really important to him. Like you'll hear him talk about links golf and St. Andrews being his most favorite golf course. And the reason it is, well, one of many reasons, is how different it can be from day to day, and how many options you are in terms of how do you play shots, whether that be flighting the ball, lines of play, what have you. And so I think that there is some element of that in what we've tried to do here, is present options. Tiger's an incredible calculator of risk when he plays golf. And I think, you know, we're trying to ask the players at TGL to really kind of calculate risk and make decisions. Right. Now, going back to kind of the ground level of this thing, so you have the canyon hole, and you're like, we should do this par 5. How are you, take me just from like step 0, it's in your brain, to having it on this screen.
Sure. So step 0 was me and scribbling on a piece of paper, like with a concept, and one of my associates, Hunter Rigsby, who was really involved in helping with the green zone as well as all of our virtual holes. Like Hunter would then take, you know, conceptually what we talked about, take the piece of paper, turn that into a CAD drawing, you know, with grades. And again, we can make up whatever grades we want because there's not an existing site. And then ultimately that CAD file with topography was shared with the team. And so Full Swing, the technology partner here, they would then inboard that and start to build out the model, if that's what the right word is. But and then again, going back to how collaborative this process was, we would, you know, do calls with Full Swing and with the team and work through adjustments, and it even got into the detail where physically we'd be together and you'd say, hey, we'd actually really like to see a little bit more there, and then, you know, a few keystrokes, and like all of a sudden you're seeing more there. Like I'd love to take that capability on the real world, you know, as opposed to having somebody on a bulldozer have to go and do that. So Full Swing was a key partner to all of this and helping to make all of this become, I sort of say reality, but it's sort of whatever, virtual reality. So that process was very, very collaborative, and again, had tools from a design perspective that we wouldn't have in the real world because of the nature of this.
Make this water.
Exactly. And visualness is a big part of us. And so, you know, we'd say, well, what if we did this, and then we could see more of that. And so that's like really quickly, whereas in the real world, like that would be a process.
Did you ever run into anything where you thought, all right, well, now that we really are unbound by like, you know, a lot of these normal design constraints, let's do X. And you're like, well, that's too much, or this is too crazy, or anything like. Did you ever run into like make a hole where you're like, nah, this isn't going to work?
I don't think we ever did. I think if anything, we maybe have been a little bit more conservative in some of our original concepting. And I still think it could be interesting to do some holes that relate to real world sites, but do them in the virtual world in whatever way
right, the pyramids.
It could be, you know, through Central Park or you know, what have you. I think at one point I think we tried to sketch a hole going around Boston Harbor, you know, kind of thing.
Right, like a home hole for each of the teams.
Yeah, I think there's something in that personally, but and so I think through time, what we realized is that we needed to take more advantage of what was capable in the virtual world, and so like this hole that's back behind us, like that was a later kind of hole for us as we sort of opened up our horizons of what the possibilities really were in this space.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be the greenskeeper as to fly the helicopter out to the middle.
I don't know how to get there. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Beau.
Thank you.